It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
Another week in the planetary asylum, but hey, it's the holidays. Who cares, right? We all will soon. In this installment of Global Alert News, chemical winter weather, temporary toxic surface cooldowns in very localized regions, and the sensationalized matrix media headlines they're intended to generate. Chemical core ice balls on the shores of the record-warm Great Lakes again. The U.S. government is looking everywhere for covert climate engineering culprits, except in the mirror. What's actually taking place in the polar regions? Is an already unfolding ocean current shutdown going to trigger a day after tomorrow scenario like the Hollywood movie? Or something else altogether? A breaking report from Newsweek that targets Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and myself for daring to address the dire issue of global climate engineering operations. From Fox News, series of major earthquakes strike Humboldt County, prompting tsunami warning. Really strange tremors. I've been through many earthquakes. This one was strangely different. We'll get to that. From PewResearch.org, about 4 in 10 U.S. adults believe humanity is, quote, living in the end times, end quote. Summary, the majority still have their eyes wide shut and are completely oblivious to the oncoming train, which is a primary reason we're in this mess in the first place. Few seem to care. Far fewer seem to have any sense of responsibility and courage toward facing what's already unfolding. And for some, worst of all, this. From Semaphore.com, coffee at highest price in 47 years. Very soon, sooner than most dare to imagine, you won't be able to get any coffee and many other staples. Don't believe it? You will. I wish it wasn't this bad. I truly wish it wasn't. But unless or until more people are willing to break bias, programming, and preconception, clear the lens through which they see the wider horizon, and look up, see what's happening in our skies. Until that happens, or unless that happens, if we continue on the current trajectory, our days are numbered. From Psych.com, this bunkerized society, why prepping for the end times is so American. Here's a footnote for those that still believe guns, bullets, and shiny metal coins will save them from what's already unfolding. It won't. Let's get to some details, starting with the U.S. government's doubling down on climate engineering denial. From Futurism.com, a new headline pushing the fantasy that some other country might be secretly geoengineering. Really? This is an ongoing story that started last week. Here's the Futurism.com headline, United States attempting to detect other countries tinkering with the climate. Now, that's the pot calling the kettle black, isn't it? Futurism.com then asks, is someone already secretly geoengineering the Earth? Question mark. Let's stop there for a moment. Are we actually expected to believe that some foreign force of jets could fly around U.S. airspace for decades, spewing out tens of millions of tons of highly toxic climate engineering elements annually, aluminum, barium, strontium, manganese, surfactants, polymer fibers, graphene, the list goes on, blotting out the formerly deep blue skies, derailing the weather across the board, and the largest military in the world, which constantly monitors every inch of airspace that serves the largest empire in human history, doesn't have a clue? This is mind-numbing moronicism. The Futurism report continues with this. Experiments to alter the climate are starting to take place all over the world to the degree that the United States is now building a system to detect when and where it's happening. And this is a follow-up from last week. Final Futurism.com excerpt. Many scientists are worried that these efforts, while well-intended, could do more harm than good by causing destructive weather patterns or benefiting some countries more than others. Let's stop there. Climate engineering is, quote, well-intended? Really? Does anyone with a still functioning God-given sense of reason and logic actually believe that what amounts to weather warfare operations are, quote, well-intended? Have the use of nuclear bombs been, quote, well-intended? Also, have the countless conflicts around the world, past and present, been well-intended? Again, this reminder, take the time to view Trinity, the nuclear bomb movie narrated by William Shatner, then try to convince yourself that the human race, taken as a whole, hasn't lost its mind. Because it isn't just the clinically insane controllers that are to blame, because they couldn't do what they do without the active or passive support of the majority population. That's the fact of the matter. It has always been so. What was the quote that Oppenheimer repeated? "I am death, the destroyer of worlds," yet they did it anyway and continue to. Also, for the record, there's absolutely nothing benevolent or benign about climate engineering anything. There never has been. It's about power and control, which includes perception management in regard to the true state of the climate and the full extent of damage already done to it. So few yet comprehend how close we are to total collapse on countless fronts. So many factors are already so far past the breaking point. On any given day, at this crossroad, the controllers could allow or trigger the house of cards to collapse, aka so-called industrialized, militarized society. Stock market is the epitome of Ponzi scheme current scenarios. Absolute epitome. The moment that market drops like a stone to the paltry value it should have, every single fund, retirement account, everything will be completely bankrupt. All of it. And the controllers know it. So they're feeding normalcy bias until the last possible second. Because for so many people, if they keep getting free money from the Ponzi scheme stock market and thus can keep buying the nothing down, no interest, and no payments for a year new cars, what could be wrong in the world, right? Who needs an environment? That is so incredibly omnicidal to think in those terms. Next, from the Undark magazine, geoengineering could alter global climate. Should it? Question mark. They say scientists and companies increasingly support blocking some sunlight to avoid the worst impacts of global warming. Stop. Again, I ask, does anyone actually believe that the money printing manipulators of the matrix are going to ask for public permission before doing absolutely anything they want in the atmosphere and to the atmosphere? Of course not. The controllers have never and will never ask for public permission. Why would they? Because the vast majority of populations have long since made clear that so long as they are kept entertained with constant bread and circus, most couldn't care less about climate engineering or, for that matter, any other injustice, catastrophe, chaos, carnage that's taking place around the world. And I'm not referring to third world populations when I say this. Third world populations that are increasingly focused only on surviving another day, as most of their countries have long since been looted, plundered, pillaged, and polluted by the tentacles of empire. Habitual denial of the oncoming train isn't a strategy for survival. It's an exercise in extremely near-term self-annihilation. Many more headlines in a moment. First, this is Dane Wigington. You're listening to the weekly installment of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Report, The End of the World as We Know It, broadcast brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of global climate engineering operations, aka weather warfare. As always, I state reaching a critical mass. This is the only way forward in this fight. We can and we absolutely must reach a critical mass, starting a conversation on climate engineering that leads people to a credible source of data. That's the key to the door. That's what starts breaking down the program bias and encourages them to look up and connect the dots. Geoengineeringwatch.org will continue all of our efforts to be the go-to source on covert climate engineering operations. A conversation on climate engineering can easily be started with Geoengineering Watch awareness-raising materials. They're available on our homepage. We pass on our printed materials, which are an extremely effective key to the door for less than our cost of producing and shipping. Our mission, my mission, in this life, this seasonal occupation called life, is to expose and halt what's happening in our skies and to free the planet from this insanity that we might have some chance of buying time, and that's worth fighting for. Check the activist suggestions link on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org if you want to know how you can help move this fight forward. Please help us to sound the alarm. Moving on, a rewind reminder headline. Al Gore at Davos 2023 said, quote, "We have the tech to slow climate change. So where's the political will?" End quote. That was from the World Economic Forum. Really, Al? The private jet flying criminal hypocrite? And what technology would that be, Mr. Gore? Climate engineering? How's that working out? Here's an idea, Al. If you have any interest in doing what's right, any interest in making a difference, tell the truth about what's taking place in our skies. It's starting to be forced to the surface for those who have become fatigued in this battle. Please do not lose your stride. Now is when we most need to keep our pace around this final turn toward the point where this issue will be forced out in the open. Will that end all our problems? Absolutely not. They're just beginning. But if we could expose this one issue, this glaring elephant in the skies, and shatter the lens through which so many have seen the world, the programmed bias training from birth lens, we would drag so much to the surface with it. We would alter the current paradigm. The fur would fly. We would cause a shockwave around the world. That would happen. We must force this issue to light. Anything else at this point is a moot point. If we don't expose and halt this biggest hole in the bottom of the boat, nothing else matters because the boat will go down. And I'm not denying all the other sources of damage to the planet. I am not denying that. But I'm stating we must prioritize. If our head's on fire, we must ignore our skinned knee and our stubbed toe. We have to put our head out first. That's this situation. From the Center for International Environmental Law, solar radiation modification, speaking of which, we just mentioned, EU must reject solar geoengineering and support non-use approach. Let's stop there. Again, yet more. Let's all pretend nothing is going on in our skies and maybe it will all magically go away. Again, how's that working out? From the report, Brussels, December 3rd, 2024, in anticipation of forthcoming scientific advice on solar radiation modification from the group of chief science advisors to the European Commission, the Center for International Environmental Law, that's CIEL, CIEL, has urged the Commission to recognize the unacceptable risks posed by solar geoengineering and support the growing political momentum for an international non-use mechanism. They continue, solar geoengineering is inconsistent with a wide range of obligations and principles under international law, including human rights obligations. They then say, trying to cool Earth by dimming the sun is inherently risky and should not be even considered as a tool to help respond to the climate crisis. No amount of research, they say, or small-scale testing can ever demonstrate what would happen if these dangerous technologies were unleashed on a planetary scale. And there's nothing in the history of humanity, they say, to suggest that we could fairly and reasonably govern an undertaking like geoengineering that would need to be sustained over hundreds of years. Let's stop there. Where do I even start with this bit from the Center for International Environmental Law? First, we already know what would happen from 75 plus years of climate intervention operations, aka weather warfare, because it's happening and will exponentially worsen at blinding speed from here on out. Next, CIEL Institute says geoengineering would need to be sustained over hundreds of years? How psychotic is that statement? Thousands of jets flying all over the world, spewing out tens of millions of tons annually, toxic planet-poisoning elements, contaminating virtually everything, burning up much of the planet's remaining carbon fuels in the process, destroying what little is left of the ozone layer, etc., etc. Exactly what has already been occurring and accelerating for decades. Life on Earth is circling the drain right now, and the CIEL Institute says it could, might be deployed for the next few hundred years. No words for this level of lunacy. Again, no need to worry. If climate engineering and countless other forms of destructive human activities continue on the current course, most or all will be gone by the end of this decade, let alone hundreds of years. Not an opinion. That's a statistical trajectory based on all current frontline data. And please don't believe me. Please investigate the frontline data on planetary life support systems, barriers, and breaking points right now. We are absolutely through the guardrail, and everyday climate engineering operations are allowed to continue diminishes our chances of even near-term survival. Don't believe it? Doesn't matter. It's coming. Wait and see. And if you try to peacefully protest, new from the UK Guardian, UN human rights expert raises concerns about US charges against climate protesters. About this headline, yes, the so-called climate protesters should be protesting climate engineering as well. Again, there can be no legitimate discussion of climate anything from any perspective without first and foremost acknowledging and addressing climate engineering operations, which include chemical ice nucleation cloud seeding, aka chemical winter weather warfare. So about peacefully protesting, about the broken climate and climate engineering. The controllers are maneuvering to put a boot over our collective necks the more we try to speak out. It's up to us not to let them. An important footnote to those that are thankfully protesting against climate engineering, remember and consider that it is extremely counterproductive to deny all the other sources of anthropogenic or human-caused sources of damage. It's a this and that equation, all the above. Keep that in mind. If we acknowledge we've been very poor stewards of the planet, which cannot rationally be denied, then we can more easily introduce the climate engineering issue to those that are concerned about the environment. We're playing chess. We need to learn how to play well. Engineered lake effect snow machine. That's exactly what's happening around the Great Lakes. The climate engineers are now so desperate to create the illusion of a normal winter weather that they are focusing on their last options for creating these scenes, creating surface zonal winds with atmospheric pressure zone manipulation across the record warm Great Lakes and nucleating the moisture that's picked up and piling it in a few localized regions and then sensationalizing media. Every channel, it's all they show. Super slick surfactant soaked snow. Thus, the constant traffic collisions, accidents, pileups, people who thought they knew how to drive in snow but now don't. Surfactants in the snow. Our lab tests have proven surfactants are used to keep the climate engineering elements from coagulating together as they're dispersed from aircraft. Let's add this from Fox Weather. Quote, insane weather conditions as Great Lakes region hit by lake effect snow. These are the type of sensationalized headlines that the climate engineers and the controllers are trying so desperately to create, especially around the holidays, that keeps more people convinced that there's nothing wrong with the climate when it's in fact completely imploding. From ABC News, lake effect snow is slamming the Great Lakes with 7 states from Wisconsin to New York under snow alerts on Monday. Let's add another one from AP News. Great Lakes region braces for more snow while cleaning up after lake effect storms. That report says even more snow could be on the way for places in the Great Lakes region that are still digging out after days of storms caused deadly wrecks. Just went over that, didn't I? Collapsed a barn on top of 100 cows. This is heavy, wet snow because it's moisture that's too warm to have naturally nucleated on its own. So you get the concrete snow that sticks to everything. And the report says, and buried some towns under nearly 6 feet. That's the headlines they really love. When looking at this week on Thursday, I believe, and even Wednesday, no precipitation in the entire country except this engineered snowstorm in that region. And by the way, the chemically nucleating elements, I've been over this before, have a desiccant effect. That's part of what enhances their cooling effect. It dries up much of the moisture in the process. So thus we have protracted drought. All 48 states and some part of those states, yes, there's deluge in other parts, and that anomaly should be even more alarming. You have record deluge and record drought in the same states in some cases. Let's keep going. From AP News, lake effect snow heading for New York State could disrupt travel and football. Can't have that. A disrupted football game. That's exactly, again, the kind of objective the climate engineers and the controllers want, because people then remember that. Remember the game we were going to go to, but it snowed out? Can't be any global warming, can there? From Wood TV, thunder snow erupts over West Michigan. Go back about 15 years, we never heard this term. Never. Now it's constant. Thunder snow? Those are atmospheric conditions that would have not normally been associated with frozen precipitation, but now they are because there's a lot of moisture in convective storms, and the climate engineers nucleate it, and thus you have this thunderstorm. So let's add this to the equation from imlive.com. Rarest type of thunder snow just occurred in Michigan. Imagine that. And now we have more Lake Michigan ice balls. Mentioned that earlier. Search Lake Michigan ice balls. Look at the images and try to convince yourself that's just normal in nature. It isn't. Next, I want to cover two messages that were sent to me late this week by very dedicated anti-climate engineering activists. They're dear friends, very valued friends in this battle. First, from Maciek in the southeast. Here's his comment or message to me this week. Crazy are the manipulators, and even more so those who, for whatever reason, in parentheses, make complete fools and liars out of themselves to toe the line for the manipulators, like the Weather Channel idiot meteorologist. Again, Weather Channel, nothing but a climate engineering cover-up agency. Maciek continues, I took some screenshots. I just read this special weather statement. It is special, all right, not anywhere near as special as morons publishing it. Yesterday morning, I left home. It was 12 degrees. It was 52 on the way back home in the afternoon. Today's high seems to have passed at midnight. Think about that, the high temperature at midnight, and then falling throughout the day. No words for all this. Next, from Larry and Kathy in somewhat eastern Washington state. Here's their comment. Total insanity. As you said, they're responding to Maciek. Worst is the morons who can lie with a straight face. Just another natural day. Speaking again of the Weather Channel, climate engineering cover-up actors, Weather Central, all the rest. Weather Nation, all the same. All owned by the same core power structure entities. Larry and Kathy continue. For the record here in White Salmon, 5 days straight, we have not gone up or down from 28 degrees on our thermometer. 0, high, and low. One temperature for 5 days straight with solid cloud cover, no wind, nothing except a very fine mist, a nucleated material that has fallen only to create a very solid ice on everything. Gravel, fences, frozen ground, piling up ice crystals, solar panels layered with ice from 2,100 foot elevation right down to the river level in town. Everything is going out of control. Chemical ice nucleation. Think about a temperature that doesn't change for days, and we've seen exactly the same in Northern California. When they're chemically nucleating, doesn't matter what time of day, the temperature either doesn't change or it can go up, as Kathy said, at midnight here, can be the high, and then it declines for the rest of the day. Chemical ice nucleation can start frozen material falling at far above freezing temperatures, but as this process continues, temperatures can be dropped far, far lower, temporarily and toxically. Don't eat the snow, don't eat the ice. I don't say that in jest. North Carolina update, new from the UK Independent. Quote, avalanche of evictions about to hit North Carolina in long aftermath of Hurricane Helene. And what's part of that aftermath? Chemical ice nucleation. Record cold in North Carolina this week on a planet that's in total meltdown. That's not nature. Let's go back a little further. Let's go to the Dakota protesters. At geoengineeringwatch.org, we've captured on water vapor loops circulating moisture at 50 degrees, atmospheric moisture that suddenly flash out the frozen material directly over the protesters. A stripe of frozen material. Nature? Really? What about Occupy Wall Street? The October surprise, the sudden snowstorm that froze them all out. Just nature? No. Ongoing weather warfare. And if you don't believe this is happening, please search the engineering winter section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org, but also search Chinese scientists create or engineer snowstorm. And you'll find major media coverage from every location. But if you bring it up here, suddenly it's a conspiracy theory. More on that in a moment. About the fallout from the freak firestorm in Lahaina, going to the other side of the spectrum of climate engineering weather warfare. New from the UK Guardian, poverty in Lahaina has doubled after 2023 wildfire. Quote, we're cutting down on what we eat, from a resident from Lahaina. How much can these people take? And what will it take for the rest of the population to realize it's coming for all of us? Drought update. Again, some portion of all 48 lower states is in some stage of drought. How can that be? Keep looking up. You'll find your answer. So how will we grow food? From the United Nations office at Geneva, private sector urged to act as world faces, wait for it, 23 trillion loss from land degradation. You can't measure this in dollars. 23 trillion, who could even imagine how big that sum is? But you can't measure it in printed fiat dollars. When the environment ceases to function, we are done. Game over. And so few understand how near that destination is. Let's add this from arstechnical.com, the science section. Can desalinization quench agriculture's thirst? Question mark. Some say it's a costly pipe dream. Others say it's a part of the future. Let's stop there. Desalinization is a total farce. Takes immense amounts of energy, creates immense amounts of toxic byproduct. You can't distribute that water over mountains and forests or anywhere else. It's just more levels of total insanity from the human race, from the so-called experts. What will it take to realize every new layer of this insanity just drives another nail into our collective coffins? And let's not forget that pesky ozone layer deterioration, existential threat. And no, it isn't getting better. No matter how many official sources there are that say otherwise, climate engineering is core to this equation. And perplexingly, even some self-proclaimed truth tellers in alternative media are also towing the line, hiding climate engineering by claiming the engineered cool downs are just a sign of global cooling or a coming ice age, or denying the ozone layer damage, when metering and even our own sense of feel should tell us otherwise. The sun is scorchingly hot on skin, surfaces. We see cows in the Pacific Northwest in winter, near the winter solstice, trying to find shade at 8 in the morning. Does anyone think that's normal or natural? The fall, early winter grasses that used to come up quickly and very robustly now barely gets out of the ground before it's scorched. So few see what's coming. What does it take? Trees with the bark burn off them, dead branches everywhere in trees, dead leaves hanging on the trees from the synthesized plant hormone defoliants that are in fall rains, which we have proven with lab tests working with UC Minnesota. Look at trees with dead leaves hanging on them and try to remember what fall should look like. The trees drop the leaves intact, discolored but intact. They don't hang there dead in the tree all winter. What's in this mix of toxic precipitation that settles down on all of us, everything we eat, drink? What's in it in totality? We can't know without knowing what we're looking for. We know enough. We know enough to know it's totally toxic, but God knows what else is in it. And there's this equation from CBC Canada: long-term exposure to wildfire smoke associated with increased risk of dementia. Ongoing story. Again, fire is still burning in much of the world right now, including Australia. So just because it's gone from here doesn't mean it's gone from everywhere. Search the engineering wildfire section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. And are the weather makers insane enough to burn forests in order to create short-term toxic cooling, to mimic the temporary cooling effects of a volcanic eruption? The short answer is yes. We have peer-reviewed study to prove it. Please search this title: Wildfires Serve Geoengineering Agenda. You won't like what you learn in that extremely important 20-minute video. Wildfire smoke linked to bigger rise in dementia risks than other sources of air pollution. The report says being exposed to wildfire smoke over a long period of time could increase the risk of developing dementia. No could, no may, no might is. And let's not mention the other materials that are in this smoke, because we have captured at geoengineeringwatch.org, stated this many times: blanket, jet, aerosol spraying directly above the smoke canopy. What might that be for? It certainly isn't climate engineering. It can only be nefarious. What's settling down through that smoke layer that's being dispersed from aircraft above the smoke layer? Think about that. Report says how smoke can reach the brain. Fine particulate matter are tiny particles in the air found in smoke. Fumes that measure less than 2.5 microns. They're much smaller than that. Smaller the particle, the more dangerous it is, and they're not even looking for anything less than 2.5 microns. Can't find what you're not looking for, can you? They say wildfire smoke can contain a dangerous cocktail of chemicals. That's a definite truth. I just described where some of those chemicals are likely coming from. They say wildfire smoke brings massive spikes of 2.5 concentrations in the air and much smaller particles, which are all going under the radar, which can affect the entire body, it states. When the body encounters foreign particles, it mounts a response, sending the lungs into a heightened state of inflammation that can spill over into other organs throughout the inflammatory cells of the bloodstream. Long-term exposure to air pollution can impact the brain. It is. Polymer nanoparticles also building up in the brain. I've been over that many times on many broadcasts. It's a wonder any of us are still walking and talking at this point, because we are literally living in a toxic fishbowl. And though there are countless forms of human contamination, the intentional dispersion of the most toxic particles of all taking place in our skies should be our top priority to stop, to expose and stop, not just derailing the weather, destroying the ozone layer, contaminating everything, every breath we take. Think about it. Back to the climate engineering assault and the matrix media assault, in this case on Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and me. Here it is, again from Newsweek. What RFK Jr. has said about chemtrails conspiracy theory by Flynn Nichols. Maybe Flynn deserves a link to the dimming. Maybe many links to the dimming. Kennedy has promoted, the report says, several conspiracy theories about vaccines. But another conspiracy theory that he has discussed, the report says, is chemtrails. In March 2023, Kennedy hosted chemtrail activist Dane Wigington on his podcast. Note that throughout this whole report, they never mention geoengineeringwatch.org, lest listeners find their way to a credible source of science data. These authors know what they're doing. They're playing their part for the manipulators of the matrix for a paycheck and a pension. That's exactly what they're doing. He continues. The episode was titled, "Are Chemtrails Real?" ? He asked Wigington several questions about the theory, including at one point asking him, what proof do we have that chemtrails are happening? And, quote, how come we don't see more whistleblowers coming out? ? Let's stop there for a moment. Did Flynn Nichols bother to mention my answer to that question? That we don't see chemtrail whistleblowers, geoengineering, because that's the only term I used during the whole exchange. But we don't see that because, one, there's NDAs, non-disclosure agreements everywhere, and two, there's an illegal federal gag order on all the nation's weathermen, National Weather Service and NOAA. Of course they're not going to line up. What happened to Julian Assange? What happened to the only U.S. official to blow the whistle on illegal torture programs, John Carrico? He was the only one to go to jail. So of course we don't see people lining up to destroy their lives, or worse, lose their lives, to blow the whistle. What a moronic question from this author. And that's the game they play throughout all of this. He continues. At one point, he, meaning RFK Jr., speculated as to whether chemtrails are causing, quote, accumulations of aluminum even in places in very remote parts of the earth. Wigington said, the Newsweek report continues, in response that planes are spraying aluminum into the environment. How do I know that? Because we spent about $100K taking, geoengineeringwatch.org spent over $100K taking a National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration flying lab to altitude, top scientists in it, all on film, all on the record, sampled what heavy aircraft were emitting, processed that sample at one of the world's most renowned labs, Rensselaer Polytechnic in New York, and we found exactly what we knew we would find, starting with aluminum nanoparticles. You can view all of this for free at the geoengineeringwatch.org documentary, The Dimming. We posted for free the day it was done on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. We then took a private jet to an even higher altitude and did exactly the same thing. We've proven this. It's not speculation. It's not theory. It's not hypothesis. Then this Newsweek reporter, Flynn Nichols, continues, quote, Wigington told Kennedy, what we're seeing in our skies are not condensation trails. In almost all cases, they're sprayed particulate trails. Dispersions is what I would have stated. How do I know that? We have film footage to prove this. We have film footage of these aircraft, nozzles visible, turning dispersions on and off. We know that all commercial carriers and all military tankers are high bypass turbofan jet engines, jet-powered fans, nearly incapable of producing a condensation trail except under rare and extreme circumstances because 90% of the air that moves through this engine is not combusted. Not combusted. No, it's not jet exhaust we're seeing, as even far too many on alt media now seem to want to convince us. Are they on the carbon fuel industry payroll or the control? Who knows? I don't know what their motives are. I truly don't. But if you believe what your eyes show you, this is not condensation, period. It's not jet exhaust, period. It's not. It's a spray dispersion, period. Final excerpts from the Newsweek report by Flynn Nichols. Kennedy said that it was, quote, kind of frightening to think that somebody may be putting large amounts of bioavailable aluminum into the environment, spraying it in microscopic particulates from airplanes. The report continues, a scientist surveyed in the 2016 study specifically rejected the claim that excess environmental aluminum was the result of spraying. Most rejected that aluminum concentrations have increased at all. Listen to how vague this is. The scientist, what scientist? What are you even referring to, Flynn Nichols? I know what he's referring to, so I'll elaborate in a moment, but no data to back up anything he states here. He's simply grabbing at straws. He finishes with, of the experts who thought that aluminum concentrations might have increased, the increase was primarily attributed to changes in industrial agriculture or natural processes. Natural processes? No. Bioavailable aluminum does not exist naturally in nature, period. It must be mined and refined and dispersed to be there, to get there. And the study he's referring to was a study organized by the world's second most recognized climate engineer, Dr. Ken Caldera, a former Department of Defense scientist who stated on the record one of his jobs for the DoD was to design ways of spraying pathogens into clouds to infect the populations below. I've been over that again and again. He then worked for Bill Gates. Bill Gates called him his most amazing teacher, something like that. This is a core part of the matrix, a core individual in the matrix. And of these scientists, Geoengineering Watch then sent a survey to all of them and about 1,400 more on top of them to ask if any of them was willing to state on the record that climate engineering wasn't occurring. We published the names of these scientists to prove the list we mailed out. Not a single one of 1,500 climate scientists that we surveyed at geoengineeringwatch.org was willing to deny that climate engineering operations were ongoing. Not one. Time to wake up. It's happening. Obviously happening. The consequences will be total if it's allowed to continue. Moving on. So with all the cold in the Great Lakes engineered snow machine region, what's it like in the land down under? From ABC News, Australia sweats through hottest spring on record. Don't see that headline in Matrix Media, do we? From CNN, the world has been warming faster than expected. Scientists now think they know why. What's this report say? The Earth's albedo, its reflectivity, has been declining since the 1970s, according to a new report. Think about that. The entire premise for solar radiation management is to increase the Earth's albedo, but what's it actually doing? It's diminishing and destroying Earth's natural cloud cover, the clouds that actually cool. When you have a large cumulus cloud float between you and the sun, you feel colder instantly. But when you have this aerosol canopy, it sometimes acts like a lens. The sunlight feels even more intense through it because it is acting as a lens. The UV is even worse at times to it, and it's destroying what's left of the ozone layer, disrupting the hydrological cycle. So now we have the proof, as geoengineeringwatch.org has stated from day one of our existence now, 15 years, climate engineering can create short-term toxic surface cooldowns at the cost of an even worse overall warming, and this confirms it yet again. The report says the scientists scoured NASA satellite data, weather data, and climate models and found the decline in low clouds, because climate engineering particles tend to disperse natural cloud cover, reduced the planet's albedo to record lows. If that doesn't alarm you, it should. Areas including parts of the North Atlantic Ocean, that's the ocean in which the plankton has crashed by 90%, the intense UV destroying the plankton, which further reduces cloud cover. It's a feedback mechanism. There's about 50 in play right now. If they continue, we're done. They say parts of the North Atlantic Ocean experienced a particularly significant fall, the study found, for the reasons I just cited. What the study can't yet explain for certain is why this is happening. Imagine that. They just don't know why. Don't know what's happening in our skies. But luckily for them, the U.S. government is setting up an alarm system just in case someone might be engineering the climate. Welcome to the asylum. Northern California update. Again, after almost 7 months of record heat, day and night, with few exceptions, then 20 inches of rain in 5 days where I live, and right back to far above normal temperatures and zero rain in sight. It's already bone dry here. The streams went dry 2 days. My stream, where my hydro used to run 6 months a year in the winter, went dry 2 to 3 days after all this rain. We are in truly uncharted territory. And what are the climate engineering cover-up actors, what terms do they use when they're reading the script for what's coming for the weather? Mostly sunny, partly sunny. All this describes aerosol filth in the skies, times of cloud and sun, hazy sunshine, filtered sunshine, sun and areas of high clouds, sunshine and few clouds. Here's my question. How will the population react once they finally understand the part that these so-called experts have played in the criminal cover-up of climate engineering? Will a justifiably outraged population then hold all those who participated in these crimes, actively or passively, including the cover-up of these crimes? Will the population hold them legally and morally accountable for their part in these crimes? We'll soon enough find out. You're listening to the weekly installment of Global Alert News, the bad news broadcast. And I do mean that literally, because it is. This is the end of the world as we know it broadcast. If you think that's exaggeration, you won't for long. Installment number 487, December 7th, 2024. This is Dane Wigington, your host. Global Alert News is brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of climate intervention operations known as geoengineering. Recordings of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Hour can be found on the homepage of Geoengineeringwatch.org and on the Dane Wigington YouTube channel. As always, I want to express my deepest gratitude to those that are marching forward in this fight. It's our collective efforts that can still make a difference. If you're on our email list, please put us on your email contact book so that our mailouts don't go to the spam files. Please help us to share the groundbreaking documentary, The Dimming, which fully exposes the climate engineering atrocities. Over 25 million views and counting. It's also on Rumble. Keep that in mind for those who want to share from another platform. You can find The Dimming on our Rumble channel. The best way to share is by circulating the direct link to The Dimming by email directly from the homepage of Geoengineeringwatch.org. Sharing directly helps us to overcome social media censorship. When viewing our YouTube of The Dimming or Global Alert News or any other Geoengineering Watch video on YouTube, please subscribe, share, and comment, all of which helps us to circulate critically important data to a much wider audience. Again, about reaching those that aren't looking up, here's an exceptional way. Start the conversation with Geoengineering Watch awareness-raising materials that can be found on our homepage. Again, our printed materials we pass on for less than our cost of producing and shipping. We're simply trying to win the fight that must be won or all is lost. More conversation starters. We have Geoengineering Watch hoodies, Geoengineering Watch shirts. We do have some shirts in white as well. Photos of both are on our homepage. We have scannable business cards, bumper stickers, all effective tools to help strike up a conversation on the climate engineering issue. Again, reaching a critical mass. This is the great imperative of this battle. If we can expose it, we can stop it from the inside out by awakening the families of those participating, those military brothers and sisters, private defense contractors that are being told they're doing something good, something benevolent. Couldn't be further from the truth. We need to wake them up. If you're willing to share a picture of yourself with a Geoengineering Watch shirt or hoodie, ideally in some crowded location, please send your photo to us so that we can post it as part of our activist compilation, which is now part of our materials page. The images encourage others to make their voices heard in this all-important battle to sound the alarm. To all those that are steadfastly committed to exposing and halting the climate engineering onslaught, you have my deepest gratitude now and forever. Thank you. Moving on, from Fox News. Series of major earthquakes strike Humboldt County off the coast of Northern California, prompting tsunami warning. The seismic event occurred at a shallow depth of 0.6 kilometers. That's very shallow. This was a very strange quake. I sat very focused through all of it. It was different than any quake I've been through. I've been through many. There was just an an aspect of this that was different to me. And I can't state why. I have no way of knowing, of course. But the fact that we're under a constant high-pressure heat dome in California, yes, it's winter, so it's not hot like summer, but it's still a high-pressure dome. And it's much warmer here now than it was in 2 weeks ago when we had all the rain and the chemical nucleation. You could hear the jets passing over, very penetrating chemical cold that went away very quickly once this moisture passed. And that's what they call a cold front now, even in the southeast or anywhere else. When there's enough moisture to chemically nucleate, they pretend it's some sort of a natural cold front. No, it's not. It's moisture that's been chemically nucleated and created a cold, dense layer of air on the surface. That's what it is. That's why that cold feels so different. More pieces of the puzzle. Gulf of Mexico oil infrastructure. Now that we're the end of hurricane season, yet again spared from any significant damage throughout hurricane season. If you live in North Carolina, you're very vulnerable to hurricanes, it seems. But if you live right smack in the middle of the record warm Gulf of Mexico, where these hurricanes are spawned and normally thrive, no, your oil infrastructure is safe. How does that happen? But wait, all we need to do to solve all our problems is drill, baby, drill, right? That'll fix everything. From the UK Guardian, climate bomb warning, over 200 billion wave of new gas projects. New liquefied natural gas projects could produce 10 gigatons of emissions by the end of the decade. We're not going to make it that far in this course. Close to the annual emissions of all coal plants currently. Banks have invested $213 billion into plans to build terminals that export and import gas. Listen, this is pedal to the metal until nothing's left. Let's keep going. From earlier this year, just a reminder that the pedal to the metal mentality, till the planet goes down in flames, literally isn't a political stripe. Both stripes are just used to confuse and distract and divide populations, to polarize them. Here's the headline, again, earlier this year. Biden administration oil drilling permits outpaced Trump. Imagine that. How many on the left are acknowledging that fact? How many? Next, from fieldnotes.com, Big Oil's plan for GOP control. Internal documents show that powerful carbon fuel trade group lays out its strategy for demolishing climate policy and boosting oil and gas production under Trump 2.0. The strategy is laid out in the 2025 policy roadmap, a plan drawn by the American Exploration and Production Council. I'm sure they're not biased, right? They have the general plan. It's good in mind, right? It's a trade organization made up of ExxonMobil, ConocoPhillips, and 24 other oil and gas corporations. Foxes running the hen house. It doesn't matter what political stripe. Makes no difference. Two sides of the same coin. Election theater is designed to polarize populations, distract them from the oncoming train. What about EV vehicles? That will save us, right? Green vehicles, total farce. And there's an issue that the industry is not acknowledging. It's called harmonic distortion. And the charging stations for the EVs cause so much harmonic distortion that it's disrupting grid power. Not only are they taking a tremendous amount of grid power, which is in so many cases produced by coal-fired plants and dilapidated nuclear plants that are soon to melt down. How green is that? But because of the nature of DC chargers, it's completely disrupting grid power, destroying transformers and other issues. And I know about this. I've learned about this the hard way with the loss of an industrial generator that wasn't equipped to handle this type of distortion from a battery charger, it seems, just to charge batteries. And no one in the industry seems to want to acknowledge this because they don't want to shatter the facade of the, quote, green saving technology. It's not. It's anything but. It's a distraction. From CNBC, why the EV boom could put a major strain on our power grid. Part of what I just described, harmonic distortion. Let's add this from dynamicratings.com. Electric vehicle charging station can cause grid problems. That's exactly what I stated. Nobody talking about this. It goes on. Grid instability. When multiple EVs charge at once, they can draw a lot of power, which can cause the grid to fluctuate and become unstable. This can lead to frequency variations. That's what I'm talking about. Inconsistent power flows and reduced power factor. Grid reliability. Some studies suggest that if EV penetration exceeds 6%, then 17% of transformers or substations will need to be replaced. Nobody talking about any of these expenses. There's nothing green about any of it. They say fully charging an EV battery requires the same amount of electricity as powering up a home during peak energy use times. EV charging is also a concentrated pull of energy over a long period of time, which increases the amount of electricity a utility needs to provide. Not to mention, again, the harmonic disturbances, which is making things exponentially worse. So, after making clear that my criticism of both the carbon fuel carnival and the so-called green energy facade, I often hear from disgruntled people that angrily retort, quote, "So what's your solution, Dane?" Here it is. My solution is to face the unwanted and almost always rejected fact that there is no magic solution. The human race has painted itself into an unimaginably dark corner, choosing to ignore reality and to think happy thoughts, which isn't going to save us from ourselves. If we have any chance of changing course, it will start with summoning the courage to fully face reality head on. Remember and consider the hallmark of a healthy mind is an unyielding willingness to face the truth, fully face the truth, no matter how dire. About the record warm Gulf of Mexico, temperature spike. When the temperatures in the Gulf should be going down, they recently went up even more. And this could indeed be a sign of the AMOC current collapsing. That's a key part of the global ocean circulation. And will that cause cooling around the planet? Will that cause the day after tomorrow scenario? No. That's a distribution system. It simply will allow one place to be slightly cooler, like Western Europe, while other regions superheat. Heat doesn't go anywhere. It's just not distributed anymore. And that makes our situation far worse, not better. Forgive me for blazing through a few headlines. I'm almost out of time. I want to get an overall picture of the horizon about the polar regions, the imploding air conditioners of the planet. From MSN.com, hundreds of scientists issue emergency warning following, quote, catastrophic shift in Antarctica. Nowhere on Earth is there a greater cause of uncertainty, end quote. From ABC News, Antarctic researchers warn of possible catastrophic sea level rise within our lifetime in group statement. It's going to happen much sooner than that. From MSM and the University of Colorado, countdown to an ice-free Arctic. New research warns of accelerated timelines. Again, it's far worse than we thought, exactly as Geoengineering Watchdog stated for a decade and a half. Let's add this. From Nature.com, the first ice-free day in the Arctic Ocean could occur before 2030. Now let's add this. New from ZME Science. We're down to 2027 now. They say first ice-free day in the Arctic could happen by 2027, study warns. It could happen next year. Think about that. That will entirely change the paradigm of the planet as the heating goes exponential and we lose the air conditioners of the planet. That's where we are. With climate engineering raging in our skies in the desperate and destructive attempt to mask the problem till the last possible moment by further fueling it. What a paradox is that? We're in the fast track to a lifeless ball of rock. And once you have 442 nuclear meltdowns, potential nuclear conflict on top of all that, and the Mad Max on steroids when the food shelves empty out, this is difficult to even begin to comprehend what's coming. On that note, this from InsideRelease.com, Olduvai Theory, predicting the fall of industrial civilization. Are we living on borrowed time? Question mark. For decades, humanity has reaped the rewards of industrial progress, enjoying unprecedented growth, technological innovation, and a lifestyle far removed from our ancestors. But what if this golden age is fleeting, nothing more than a brief chapter in the vast history of civilization? Question mark. This unsettling idea is at the core of the Olduvai Theory, a hypothesis that paints a dire picture of our future. It's not a hypothesis. It's a glaring, inarguable, unfolding reality for any that don't have their eyes wide shut. For over 2 decades, I've desperately tried to warn. As biosphere collapse becomes impossible to hide, the controllers will play much bigger cards. It is already unfolding at blinding speed. Let's add this recent headline, the surprising allure of ignorance. We want to know, but we also want not to know, sometimes fiercely so. From covert climate engineering operations to conflict zones to unfolding and accelerating global atmospheric and ecological collapse, all are connected, all are inseparable. How many continue to pretend it isn't so? Forgive me for repeating these timeless words of wisdom from the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius, which I have been steadfastly anchored to since I was 14 years old, because this describes the default alternative to standing against the storm. He said, quote, 2,000 years ago, it is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. Again, Marcus Aurelius. It's up to each of us to decide to make our lives count while we still can, to stand with all our strength, with all our courage against the fading of the light. That is a life well lived. No matter what comes, no matter what we face, if enough of us stand together, we may yet make a profound difference, even at this late hour. Who can say what allies we may have that we are not yet aware of? Please check the activist suggestions link on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org for specific instructions on how you can help to move this fight forward. Let no one deter you from your mission. Let no one distract you from the post at which your Maker has placed you. Let no one silence your voice. Until next week, this is Dane Wigington from geoengineeringwatch.org.